You're listening to Underworld on the Ghost Radio Network.
Ghost Radio Australia.
Listen.
Hauntings. The unexplained. Synchronicity. EVP.
So why are you?
I heard that.
Absolutely fascinating.
What are Midnights? Is it real? What do you think?
I love you.
The unseen.
I'm alright.
1111. Who or what are mutilating cattle?
Listen.
Poltergeists. Your stories. Your experiences. Listen close.
Gary Opit is an environmental scientist, author, and one of the world's leading authorities on cryptozoology. Ghost Radio interviewed, or Denise Blazek interviewed Gary Opit last year, or maybe 2 years ago, and there is a concise archive of her interview in the Ghost Radio archives available for everyone to listen to, and I would encourage everybody to go back and listen to that show. It will get into the beginnings of Gary's understanding of cryptozoology and all of that. This interview tonight is more about what's been happening the last 2 years since we've spoken to Gary. Welcome back to Ghost Radio.
Thank you, Lia.
Now, as I said, there is an archived interview in Ghost Radio that Denise did with you 18 months ago, 2 years ago, that covers all your concise history about cryptozoology and Yowies and things. So can we just say, in that last 18 months, 2 years since you've spoken to Denise, I know you've been doing so many interesting things. You've done Monster Quest, you've put out a couple of books. Let's start at Monster Quest. How was that?
Oh, that was excellent. Yes, we did Monster Quest and also Destination Truth, two different documentaries with the American film teams that came over, and I led them into the Wallamai wilderness, looking for giant goannas, Megalania prisca. Rex and Heather Gilroy came along on that particular small expedition, and then a second expedition interviewing people that had observed the Yowie in the Blue Mountains.
Mm-hmm. And
they both went very well, and of course there was the documentaries are shown on cable TV.
Discovery Channel, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, Discovery Channel, exactly.
And did we happen to film any giant goannas or?
Oh, no, of course. I mean, who knows if these giant goannas actually exist. It's like so many of these cryptic animals, it's difficult to know what's really going on. People on very rare occasions observe these animals that theoretically should be extinct, and Rex and Heather Gilroy have taken a couple of very remarkable plaster casts of what appear to be giant goanna footprints. But the difficulty with the survival of something like that is that you have to have a breeding population, and these giant goannas were about 10 metres in length and were predators.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they've survived, it's very remarkable that they haven't been more often encountered. So, I find it very difficult to believe that the giant goanna has survived. But then all of the cryptic animals pose a great mystery, because theoretically they should definitely all be extinct. And after a couple of 100 years of European settlement on this continent and scientific inquiries going on all the time, I mean, the place is full of biologists researching, undertaking fauna and flora surveys, and you would think that these animals would have been photographed by now. However, there is plenty of evidence that there are at least a couple of species of large mammals that still haven't been scientifically recognised, and I know that for a fact because I've actually encountered them, and of course they're mentioned in my book, Australian Cryptozoology, that I've recently published. But it is a great conundrum, a great mystery, because how on earth can these animals survive without being detected?
Well, I mean, you know, I haven't spent a quarter of amount of the time that you've spent in the bush. I was lucky enough to live for 10 years in Darwin and spend a lot of time in Arnhem Land, but you have just spent so much of your life in the bush. Can you, through that time you've spent in the bush, understand how isolated, you know, some parts of Australia actually are, and could you theoretically see how perhaps the isolation could keep these pockets of, you know, like you said, the mammals alive?
These animals, these unknown cryptic animals, don't just dwell in isolated localities. They're actually dwelling within closely settled environments. And so the only explanation that I can come up with is that these animals, because they're carnivorous or primarily carnivorous, and we're talking about several species. You know, we have the striped marsupial cat that's been observed for a couple of 100 years, I guess, and still being observed. The Tasmanian thylacine or Tasmanian tiger or marsupial wolf still being observed both in Tasmania and across the mainland. Big cats, particularly the panther, which is a black leopard, and also the American mountain lion or puma and cougar. These are big carnivores that are still being seen, still occasionally being videoed or photographed. Evidence continue to come in of stock being eaten or native animals being consumed, and yet we don't have any hard evidence. We do have a bit of DNA evidence where a black panther-like animal was shot down in Victoria, and the tail was kept, and the DNA analysis was taken on the tail and turned out to be a giant feral cat, a giant domestic cat. And that in itself is absolutely remarkable, because it's unheard of that a domestic cat could grow to the size of a panther.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it's a great conundrum. Like, how can these large animals be inhabiting localities where they're being regularly observed, adjacent small towns, in rural areas, being observed by farmers particularly and rural dwellers, and yet nothing ever comes in to prove to the scientific community that these animals actually exist. And then, of course, we have the most remarkable animals, of course, the Yowie, or also known as the Doulagal, and by a variety of other Aboriginal names. And these are animals. I mean, this is a second species of human. It was named by Linnaeus a couple of 100 years ago or so, when he devised the biological systematic naming of animals and plants. This incredible 2-meter tall, hair-covered hominin, human-like creature, was scientifically described then, along with Homo sapiens ourselves, that species known as Homo troglodyte. And it's probably related to Australopithecus robustus and Meganthropus boisei, Meganthropus archaeojabanicus, animal is actually under observation presently. A researcher and friend is actually studying males. He's got 2 males under observation at the moment, 2 young males. This is going on the Gold Coast, in very close proximity to large numbers of residences, and yet the animals are able to remain completely unknown to the general population.
Do you think that's a skill that they've acquired rather than our ignorance?
Yes, these animals are all intelligent. I mean, both big cats and predatory animals like the thylacine and this other striped marsupial cat, which may well be Thylacoleo carnifex, the marsupial lion. They're all ambush predators, so they occupy their lives watching the environment, closely studying every aspect of their environment, keeping out of the way of other predators like ourselves or other individuals of their own species, because they're territorial, and continuously keeping an eye on the movement of prey that they depend on. And so they are naturally cryptic in that they naturally hide. They don't want to be observed. They don't want to be observed by their prey, and they don't want to be observed by any other animals. And so they are able to keep completely hidden. And of course today, not many people actually venture off into the countryside. Most people spend their lives in their cars and at their places of work and in their homes. And when they do head off into the countryside, they're usually visiting national parks or state forests, and they're following tracks.
Close to barbecues,
off into the, dense vegetation and where most of the wildlife dwells.
Yes, exactly. You put down the Yowies, the numbers of having dropped to Aboriginal hunting and dingoes, and since that's kind of backed up, you feel that the numbers may have risen. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. They must have been under intense hunting pressure, as was the thylacine or Tasmanian tiger. That's an interesting situation in Tasmania. The Tasmanian tiger wasn't described until about 4 years after settlement, and the early settlers of Tasmania, European settlers of Tasmania, very rarely encountered the Tasmanian tiger, and it was regarded and described as a very rare animal that lived in very remote places. Then, of course, the Aboriginal population were decimated by the Europeans, and then the Tasmanian tiger numbers began to increase to such a degree that then that a bounty was placed upon them, and some thousands of individuals were caught by trappers using snares, and then the population dramatically declined into probable or possible extinction, the last individual being captured around about 1936 or just before then, and kept in captivity until 1936. So that's a clear indication that the Tasmanian tiger or thylacine was under heavy competitive or predatory pressure by the Aboriginal people, and there were no dingoes, of course, in Tasmania. And then after that pressure was eliminated by the removal of Aboriginal people from their territories, the Tasmanian tiger populations recuperated, and so were able to be trapped and captured and even kept as pets and transported to zoos all over the world. And then their populations dramatically declined, probably because of the competition, pressure and predation from European settlers. So that's a perfect example of what's been going on all over the continent and all over the world. And so with this Homo troglodyte or Yowie, which is sort of a gorilla-like nocturnal omnivore, known, well known overseas as the Sasquatch or Bigfoot or Yeti, and so it's also been under extreme pressure.
So what does Aboriginal lore or legend tell us about, these cryptid animals? Are they a part of their dream time?
Oh yes, yeah. The Yowie is well known under several names, and the Yowie was of extreme importance in Aboriginal culture, and Aboriginal people have stated on several occasions that it was one of the few things that they didn't bring to the attention of Europeans, naturally because they were being highly persecuted and chased out of their homes, and so but the area is of extreme importance, and for instance, I talked with an elder from the south coast of New South Wales who told me that to become an initiated man, he had to undertake a walk with his grandfather along the Yowie Trail or Doolagale Trail that runs through the mountainous country in southern New South Wales. And if they saw a Yowie, then that meant that they had to undertake the initiation ceremony. And in fact, they did see a Yowie. And every night as they were moving through that Yowie habitat, they would build 4 fires around their campsite and make sure that they didn't leave any food lying around, and that would attract their Yowies in, so they could have a peaceful night. Yeah, and then after the initiation took place and the young chap's body was covered in a mixture of blood and ochre, the ceremony finished with the washing of the body in a particular sacred pool, and not long afterwards a pair of the little Junjuddies, the little miniature Yowies, were observed watching the action, and in their tradition, the blood and ochre washed off the body then becomes one of these little Junjuddies. And these little Junjuddies appear to be Homo floresiensis, this wonderful little miniature human that was discovered in the caves in Flores, eastern Indonesia, with several fossil skeletons found dating back only 13,000 years.
They've been calling it the Hobbit, haven't they?
That's right, that's the Hobbit, yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, and I've got photographs in my book and drawings of that, I've had that, and I live in a nature reserve or adjacent to nature reserve, and it's very difficult to know, but I think that there are definitely hobbits living in my area because I've heard their calls, their very powerful calls, and I found one of their wonderful little stick structures. I imagine it was built by them because adjacent this small stick structure, it's basically shaped a little bit like a teepee, 4 or 5 sticks all placed together to make a little teepee shape. And in the mud around it was a large number of footprints and knuckle prints, as if they were running and playing or undertaking some sort of behaviour. And I've had unusual calls taking place, and also find lots of small sticks impaled into the ground, standing upright, and even pieces of curled bark that had been impaled into the ground, often pushed through other pieces of bark. And so, I'm never 100% sure because, I study the environment in great detail, all of the plants and animals in my locality, and all the traces that can determine their existence. And when I hear calls, strange barking calls close to me, then you think, wow, this is very bizarre. And I think there's also the larger Yowies here as well. I haven't seen anything, but some months ago I had an animal approach me through the vegetation over about 5 minutes, starting about maybe 50 metres away, and twice my dog barked at it, gave its alarm bark, double bark, because it was being approached by something through the vegetation that it was concerned about. And this animal continued to approach, even though my dog had barked at it a couple of times. And the interesting thing was that it seemed to be whacking two sticks together as it came, because every now and then there was a very loud crack. So I thought at first that it was stepping on sticks that were cracking. And I was imagining maybe it was a lost bushwalker heading towards me, or maybe a cow that got into the nature reserve and was wandering around, and it's heavy enough to crack sticks underneath. And it got up to within 7 or 8 metres of me, and I was looking through the binoculars trying to see what it was, and it moved parallel to me, and I could just see a movement about 2 metres high, and then it just suddenly went dead quiet. So I carefully pushed my way in to where it was, and there was nothing to be found. And I walked around for quite a while. Interesting thing, there was no sticks lying around at all that had been stepped upon to make this cracking sound. And there was not even trees that you could have hit one stick against it to make that sound. So the only thing I can imagine was that it was holding two sticks and it was whacking those sticks together. And I found what looked like a nest or a big bed, but a bit hard to know if it was a whole congregation of materials that had fallen down or it was actually some sort of a bed. But I didn't find any sign of the animal that was brave enough to approach me from within 50 metres and be unconcerned that on 2 occasions my dog had actually barked at it.
Because it's a bit of a quandary, because you and other cryptozoologists have said that, you know, Yowies have been known to throw rocks, but yet if approached will run away.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's what they do. They'll only throw rocks when they're, and it's probably only territorial males that'll come anywhere near a human. The mothers and young stay far away. And only a couple of years ago on Father's Day, a group of tourists up at Bestival Lookouts on Springbrook, where several close Yowie encounters have occurred over the years, a group of tourists, Chinese tourists led by a Chinese tourist guide, were startled by a figure hiding in the vegetation and throwing rocks at them and giving forth with non-human shrieks and screams and roars and grunts. And so they were quite petrified, and the tour guide went back to their lunch place at one of the local cafes, the Homestead Cafe, and asked them if they thought that somebody on the mountain, you know, doesn't like Chinese tourists, and was assured that no one would treat anybody like that. You know, behind the Gold Coast we have international visitors from everywhere, and he said he'd never heard of the Yowies, but he thought it was hard to believe that it was human, even though he couldn't imagine what else it could be because of these unearthly, non-human-like screams and roars and grunts and the power of throwing the rocks. However, they generally don't throw the rocks to hurt you. they wanted to harm people, they could kill people very easily. I mean, they could easily hit somebody with a rock. There was an encounter in Western Queensland recently where a drilling team moving through undisturbed bushland actually, and had a very noisy generator operating, and they were confronted by a pair of Yowies, and one of them threw a rock and hit this fellow right on the head. Thankfully, he was wearing one of those helmets.
He must have got the shock of his life.
It can take place, but you have to be really upsetting the Yowies to disturb them like that. And that's why they're not known, because they're completely unaggressive. And you have to do something really nasty to get them mad enough to actually hurt a person.
I'm not sure if you saw it, but the newspaper here in Perth ran a picture on their webpage of a giant feral pig that was caught at Roy Hill Station near Newman in WA's Pilbara, and it was floating around the internet, and basically the environmental reporter asked, is this true, or is this a made-up picture? And somebody came forth and said, no, that's my uncle, that actually did happen. He killed it on his property, and he was worried that it would take his sheep. And he didn't want anybody knowing about it because he doesn't want, bounty hunters coming up there and that type of thing. But, I mean, if you saw this picture of this giant feral pig, it is unbelievable, Gary. Did you see it?
Yes, I did. From the photograph, it was a bit difficult to determine whether the pig was sort of closer to the camera than the person, so it made it look larger. But, yeah, you're right. I have no doubt it was a giant feral pig, and some animals can grow to much larger sizes, but of course that's a very rare thing.
Yes.
Because unfortunately, Australia's overrun virtually across the whole top northern half of Australia with wild pigs, but almost none of them get to a huge size.
Well, that's what they said, that the theory is that, a pig wouldn't be able to take the heats up in the Pilbara and that type of thing, but regardless of what science and everybody says, the thing existed, And
yes, exactly. And so we do have the same with these giant feral cats. That tail that was cut from a giant panther-sized cat that was shot in Gippsland is evidence that this is actually happening. And it's unfortunate that the scientific community isn't looking at it, but it's understandable because all these different scientists are specialists working in particular fields and working for universities and museums and what have you, and they're working to solve particular problems, to understand the biology and behaviour and the ecology of different areas. So there's no one working on animals that supposedly, don't exist. But it looks like we do indeed have, for instance, giant feral cats, even though the literature says no, they don't exist.
Yeah, exactly. Last year at the Nexus conference, and you gave by all accounts, from what I've heard and what I've reviewed on the internet, a fabulous presentation and lecture on your newest book, which is titled Understanding Humans, Extraterrestrials and Our Planetary Mind. Tell me how this book came about.
I've been working on that book for about 25 years, and I've been involved in the conservation movement since the mid-1960s, and we've had great results with that, of course. We're now very environmentally conscious, and I've always been talking to people and saying, look, we're not saving the environment just for these little creepy crawlies or the cute and cuddlies or whatever, the native animals and plants. The natural environment is human environment. It's the ecosystems that are essential for our survival, moderate the climate and the rainfall and everything else. And now, of course, we're discovering that by destroying the environment, you get global warming and you get all kinds of disastrous possibilities emerging. So I had started writing the book because I really wanted really wanted to understand humanity, exactly what we are, and what the environment is, and how it all comes together. And so I began researching a whole array of different scientific fields, everything from microbiology to cosmology, to really understand what humans are. And slowly I gathered the information together. It all came from scientific books and scientific journals and, popular journals like New Scientist. And I slowly put it all together. And then I decided that I should also look at the extraterrestrial situation, because, that is part of our environment. These are unidentified flying objects that are constantly being reported and photographed, and their accounts of extraterrestrial contact. And I'd always been interested, but I hadn't really researched it to any degree, so I examined all the literature on that as well, and found that it was all very believable, because once again there's a very distinct pattern running through it all. And so just the same as, you might think, people are hallucinating or imagining or seeing things, and the way you can test that then is, well, exactly what are people seeing, what are they experiencing, and if it's a whole array of different experiences, and say people are seeing dragons and witches on broomsticks and mythical figures and Apollo and Zeus and, winged horses and all of these kinds of things, then you can say, yes, these are indeed hallucinations. There's something going on. People hallucinate, or they're liars or hoaxes, and so you get a whole array of different information coming in. But of course, if something actually exists, then you get the same information. You can see the pattern, so that if someone sees describes an animal that's spotted and, sort of around about the size of a possum with reddish brown with white spots, and it's it's a carnivore or something, then somebody's seen a spotted tail quoll, a carnivorous marsupial.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's how we understand the world. The information coming in, you can put it together, and you can see patterns. You can see that these are different kinds of animals and plants. So the same thing happens when you study both cryptic animals, cryptozoology, and also extraterrestrials. You get the same patterns, you get the same descriptions, the same behaviour being encountered and reported over a long period of time. And so eventually I put it all together and launched it. Most recent launch was at the Nexus conference, where I gave a presentation, and yes, everyone enjoyed that. And in it includes, for the very first time, an actual biological classification of extraterrestrials based on contact accounts. And so what I did, I actually scientifically described 29 species of technologically advanced entities or animals, and I've classified them just the same way we classify animals and plants here on Earth. I use the Linnaean system, which means everything's classified into kingdoms, phylums, class, orders, families, genus, and then species. So, for instance, and so because I did it all in using the normal Latin and Greek,
Mm-hmm.
and so what I did, classification, like the kingdom is Animalides, which Ides means similar to animals.
Mm-hmm.
Phylum is Chordatides, which is similar to chordates. The majority of them appear to be mammal-like in that they look like they're warm-blooded, mammal-like animals, very much like humans in many ways. So anyway, the class is Mammalides. The the order is Primatides because they're very much like primates, the majority of these. And then some are very human-like, and so I've put them in the family Juxtahominidae. Of course, these things aren't related to humans. It's simply a perfect example of parallel evolution. And of course, more and more people are understanding that nothing's static, that the universe is in continuous movement, the dynamic movement, dynamic universe. The continents are moving. The Australian continent's moving north at 7 centimetres a year. All the plants and animals are constantly adapting to their local environment so that they can survive. And so animals tend to look like each other, even though they're unrelated in any way. So we have the perfect example of the Tasmanian tiger or marsupial wolf, which looks very much like a dog or wolf, but is in no way related to it whatsoever. They are, of course, marsupials related to possums, and most places are related to Tasmanian devils and the quolls. So I named a number of them, 28 species, and of course, as an example, the oldest observation that I was able to record is a species I've called the elegant humanoid, Pseudo Homo consinus, that was recorded on 25th of November 1896.
Wow.
California, and the Roswell humanoid that was collected at Roswell in amongst the debris of a downed craft. I named that the Hominides roswellensis, which means Roswell resembling man. And then the greys, which of course are the dominant species that really continuously interact with humans. I named them Polioderma gygusculus, which means big-eyed grey skin. And so we've had quite a number of different interesting species. There's the little green humanoid. Now we hear about the little green man, little green humanoid, Viridinanus octodactylus, the 8-fingered green dwarf. That was encountered and reported on the 14th of August 1947 in Italy by Professor Johannes, who was a geologist, anthropologist. So that's just one small example of the species that I've classified. Of course, we don't have any specimens lodged in public institutions. So it's purely an academic study. But
Must have been the first.
It's important to classify everything the same way it's important to classify members of your community or members of your family, so you can recognise each other and understand how you all interrelate.
It must have been the first book of its time, of its type, was it?
Oh yes, yeah. There's, as far as I know, there's nothing like it at all.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. And like just a couple of extra little things, because it's basically the book's primarily about us and and how we interrelate with the universe and how the universe operates. It's all understood now, but of course it's not generally related to the general public, because most of these specialists are working in their own fields. So a microbiologist has nothing to do with a cosmologist, who has nothing to do with an anthropologist or a zoologist or an ecologist or whatever. So I've put all the information together. But to really understand humans, and we must remember that to all other potentially occurring life forms throughout the universe, we are the extraterrestrials. We are the bizarre life forms that live virtually at the end of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at us closely, to understand, I mean, we're obviously human beings, but if you look at us microbiologists examining human tissue began to study humans relatively recently to really examine these cells, they found that they could only find, in every 1,000 cells, they could only find one human cell. And so they've finally begun to realise that we are only 1% human and a maximum of 10% human, and that the majority of our tissues and organs is non-human, that we've been colonised by microbes unrelated to us in any way, but which have adapted to live inside and form part of human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And that the only 100% pure human is an unborn child. And as soon as that child's born, it's colonised by the bacteria that had colonised and are part of the mother. And so as the child grows, these microbes make up the majority of the body of the child. And so that the only part of a human being that is 100% human is the brain, the lungs, and the blood system. That's the only thing that's truly human. The rest of their bodies, we can only find one human cell to 1,000 non-human cells. And these cells, these microbes, are actually essential for our survival, because we actually live in a sea of microbes. The atmosphere that we walk about and live in is almost like it's just like a less dense ocean. And there's something like 10,000 microbes in every square metre of air. We're breathing these things in all the time. But because our bodies have been colonised completely by huge numbers of different species of microbes, so far we've been able to identify 4% of the microbes that make up our bodies. Scientists, this is. So these microbes keep us healthy because there's so many of them, and these are all microbes adapted to live as part of a human being, that other free-living microbes are unable to get a foothold. If they did, they'd cause disease. And of course these microbes are also totally responsible for digesting all of our food. And as we know, we talk about the gut flora, and if we take antibiotics, we've got to be careful we don't kill the good bacteria along with the bad bacteria. Because it's those almost, we might say, non-native bacteria that get into us, whether it's malaria injected by mosquitoes or all of the other diseases, all these other viruses and bacteria that cause us illness, and we should use antibiotics to get rid of. We're always got to be careful we don't destroy the antibiotics that actually make up our body. So you can see that we're actually part of the living ecosystem of the planet. We're a part of the living surface of the planet. And so although we are definitely human beings, we're also a population of symbiotic microbes, symbiotic bacteria.
Excellent. Is it safe to say that we know less about ourselves more than what we know about ourselves?
Yeah, look, the other incredible discovery that was made not too long ago, cosmologists were pretty certain that they understood the workings of the universe. They understood all the laws of nature, etc., that makes everything possible, gravity and everything else. And so they used all the mathematical data to create a galaxy, just like the Milky Way galaxy that we see every night if we go out of doors at night, and create a galaxy, a big galaxy of stars, and then they spun it on their computer, and these computer models of galaxies just broke apart. And they had under the impression that, as one would, that in the galaxy of stars, and of course the Earth is near the edge of our galaxy, and in the centre of the galaxy there's a giant black hole, and everything swirls around the centre of the galaxy, so it takes us 200 million years for us to travel and they believed that naturally enough, the centre of the galaxy would be spinning faster than the outer edge, because the outer edge is being dragged along. But in fact, they discovered that no, the entire galaxy is spinning at exactly the same speed, and yet there's not enough matter and gravity and energy to make that a possibility. So, and they finally came to the conclusion that the universe, or ourselves, or the galaxy, is only constructed of 4% atoms. And so 96% of reality, that includes ourselves and our everyday world, is undetectable. And so they came up with the theory that the universe is constructed primarily out of dark matter and dark energy. They describe it as dark energy and dark matter because it's undetectable in any way. And that means if the universe is 96% undetectable, that means we're 96% of us and our dogs and our pets and our homes and our businesses and our world is undetectable by us.
I was going to say, it makes you...
we see, all reality we can see, only makes up 4% of that reality. 96% is unknown.
Makes you wonder what's going on in that 96%, doesn't it?
Exactly, but that 96% is actually essential for our survival.
Yeah.
So does that mean that the rest of reality, that 96% of reality is actually vibrating at a frequency that's at a higher dimension or something that we're completely unable to detect? So they're just a couple of things, and the book's full of this sort of stuff. And of course, it's a really interesting thing about science, because for a long time, all our cultures have had different explanations for our existence, and we generally refer to that as religions. And religions and science have always appeared to be moving in the sort of opposite directions, because religion is basically based on traditions and writings from previous generations, and then science is experimenting with what's happening around us today, putting up theories and then experimenting to see if we can prove or disprove these theories. And of course, science has created this fabulous technological world that we live in, and given us long lives and healthy environments. Of course, it's also caused all kinds of problems, of course, because the development of intelligence and technology can produce both positive and negative attributes. And so we have powerful technologies that could destroy us, like nuclear weapons or whatever, and powerful technologies like modern medicine that saves lives. But when we study anything, we have to work out exactly what we're made of, what we're constructed out of. If you want to understand a car, it's one thing to drive it around and fill it full of petrol and oil, but it's another thing to understand how that car actually works. You need a mechanic to break it down and tell you what's going on inside the engine and how everything works. And of course, you need a physicist to then study exactly what it's constructed out of, because we know everything's constructed out of elements that interaction between that straight line motion and the circular motion of matter creates reality.
Mm-hmm.
So you can say that reality isn't actually created as the nuts and bolts that we originally thought it was constructed out of. It's constructed entirely out of interactions between radiation. So in other words, there's nothing actually moving. There's the movement, but there's nothing, no particles, or everything has a wave-particle duality where it's a wave or motion or radiation. At the same time, it's a particle, which is sort of an impossibility, and is the way we simply detect it. So you can say then that the universe is constructed entirely out of data or information, or perhaps you could say consciousness, as if the entire universe is constructed, say, out of the mind of God. And so that's where science and religion come together, because obviously, both science and religion comes from the mind of a human being, and so it's one and the same thing, it's just different interpretations.
Yes. Well, you did that very nicely, the way you summed all that up. That was excellent. Well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Gary, with the classifications you were talking about of the extraterrestrial races, the 28, 29 classes that you put in your book, I wondered, creatures like the mantis beings that people report being abducted by, 8-foot and mantis-type looking, or the green dwarf that you were talking about before, what does their physiology tell us about their world? I imagine to be kind of 8-foot and mantis-like. Their gravity must be completely different to ours.
Yes, look, the physiology or morphology of an animal will immediately tell you the environment that it grew up in, to a degree. And that mantis, of course, I actually classified that as Dr. Grillis tegumen, which means armoured clever cricket. And that was first recorded, as far as I've been able to determine, in 1973 at Cooksville, Maryland, USA, by Mike Shear, a lawyer. And it's a 2-metre tall praying mantis-like species. It's a bit difficult to know if it's actually insectoid, or simply a mammal-like species that has evolved into a tall praying mantis-like shape. But to understand how that species evolved, and it's these mantis-like creatures that are often referred to by contactees and abductees as often in control of the greys, because there's quite a few of these species living together, these intelligent spacefaring species. And so you can tend to understand how they came about by looking at the situation here on Earth. And for us to be alive and to have a living planet, 8 miraculous events needs to occur. And they are, for a start, the only chance it's believed that you can have a living planet is towards the outer edge of a galaxy, because towards the centre of the galaxy there's so many stars that the radiation would probably be too toxic for life. You can't be too far out on the edge of the galaxy because there's a lack of heavy elements, all of which are created during supernovae. So the carbon and all of the other elements that make up our bodies and make up this planet are all created by suns going into supernova, blowing up. And the universe is constructed entirely out of hydrogen, and the universe is primarily only interested in hydrogen. And we have, the universe is constantly messing about with giant suns and black holes and supernovae, etc. And a living planet is a very rare phenomena in the universe. There might be one, if you're lucky, in each galaxy, probably. And the reason for that is scientists have determined that the only stable stars, or suns, as we call our star, are small yellow suns like our own. And they burn happily away for literally billions of years without any massive changes in the heat output. And you can imagine if our sun would at times decrease its heat output, so everything would just freeze over, and then after a while it would increase its heat, and everything would boil on this planet. You wouldn't have a living planet spinning around such a star. So most of the stars are absolutely massive, gigantuous compared to our little sun. They're huge, and the amount of solar radiation they put out would be stupendous. So you couldn't have any living planets around the majority of stars you see in the sky. And only about 5% of the stars in our galaxy are small yellow stars like ours, stable stars that just burn away and produce just the right amount of heat for vast periods of time. So that's absolutely essential. And then your planet has to be exactly the right size, so the gravity isn't too small, such as Mars, which is because it's a smaller planet, it's got less mass and less gravity, and so it's lost its atmosphere. Doesn't have the gravity to hold its atmosphere. If our planet was a bit larger than it is, then the gravity would be stronger, which means probably would be impossible to stand up. In fact, it might be wonderful for slugs, worms or something perhaps, but it would be very difficult for trees to stand up or to have large animals walking around on the surface. So you have to have a perfectly sized planet, just the right size, so the gravity's perfect to hold the atmosphere, but not too big and powerful to create super strong gravity. And then the planet also has to be at exactly the right distance from its star, so that it's not too hot and not too cold, so that H2O can remain in a liquid state, as water. Of course, if our planet was just a little bit further away, say Mars, for instance, well, it's freezing cold. All you'd get was ice. You wouldn't get liquid water, or it wouldn't remain liquid for very long. If we're a little bit too close to the sun, say towards Venus or something, H2O might only exist as a gas because it'd be too hot for water to remain as a liquid. So you have to be exactly the right distance from the star, and at the same time you must remember that all stars are constantly increasing in heat as they burn up their hydrogen, even the small yellow stars. And so our star has been steadily increasing in temperature, and so our planet had to be just the right distance, so it was the right temperature when the star was a little bit cooler, and it's the right temperature now after billions of years where the star is slowly increasing in temperature. So you've got to be right in the exact position. Then the other absolutely essential thing is you have to have a spinning core that's creating a magnetic shield around the planet. And few people tend to think that we talk about the rocky planets that are Venus, Earth, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. But of course they're not really rocky planets like the Earth. I don't know about Mercury, but they're probably all the same. And Mars, they're actually liquid planets. The Earth is constructed of white hot liquid rock, and only 100 kilometres below our feet it's white hot like the sun. And there's great currents of liquid rock flying beneath our feet, and the Australian continent, for instance, is moving north at 7 centimetres a year, as is India and California. The continents are moving about. And at the very centre of the planet, there's a solid, or they talk about a solid liquid core, but anyway, it's a core believed to be made out of iron and nickel, and it's spinning faster than the rest of the planet, around about a metre a year faster. And that creates a magnetic field, which creates magnetism so that compasses work, and it also creates a magnetic shield around the planet that protects us from solar radiation. Without a faster spinning core, there's no chance of life on the planet, so that's why we won't find anything alive on Mars. It needs a faster spinning core, and it doesn't have one. It doesn't have a magnetic shield. Absolutely essential magnetic shield. Then the other thing that's absolutely essential for a living planet, it has to be tilted virtually to exactly 22 degrees. The other planets of our solar system, they're just standing straight up or straight up and down. If our planet wasn't tilted at 22 degrees, permanent cyclonic winds blowing across it,
Mm-hmm.
which would make it very uncomfortable for any kind of life forms.
Yes.
So you have to have a tilted planet. And you also have to have a huge moon that stabilises the orbit of the Earth. Now, if we didn't have the moon, our planet would be wobbling, just like all the other planets wobble, as much as 60 degrees, so that where it was the tropics, it would slowly wobble down to be freezing cold, and then it would wobble back again, so it was boiling hot again. So you wouldn't have stable conditions. You'd have horrific windstorms, and there'd be no chance of life. So the only reason there's life on this planet, and the only reason I can talk to you, is because of that moon sitting up in the sky, stabilising the planet's orbit. And that moon has to be very large to be able to stabilise the Earth. And our moon is a huge moon compared to the size of our planet. All the other moons around the other planets are only tiny moons in comparison to their planet that they're orbiting. So that's absolutely essential. A huge moon. And as well as that, it's believed that the moon was created by an impact of a Mars-sized planet with the Earth when it was forming for about 4 billion years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the moon and Earth collided several times. They hit and then sort of bounced back. They sort of collided, and then the gravity dragged them back together again. They collided again, and about 3 times, they believe. And that's what tilted our planet over 22 degrees. And the moon scooped up 70% of the Earth's crust,
Mm-hmm.
creating basins into which the oceans flowed. So if the moon hadn't done that, this would be a water planet. There'd be no land. But fortunately, the moon scooped up 70% of the Earth's crust, creating a giant moon and a planet with large basins where the water can collect.
Makes
So they're doing all the essential things. And the other bizarre thing about the moon, which has never been really explained, is that the moon appears to be somewhat hollow, and that unlike all the other planets and moons, it doesn't have a heavy central core. And that was proved during the Apollo missions, when they set up seismometers on the planet's surface, and it'd crash modules back onto the moon's surface, and the moon would ring like a bell. It's hollow, and that's a very difficult thing to describe, because when something's forming in a vacuum of space, all the heavy material spins to the centre, and then the lighter material collects on top, and that's how it is with all the other moons and planets, but not our moon. So a very unusual situation. And the other really interesting thing when you study the Earth and the Moon and the Sun, you take measurements of their diameters and their distances and their revolutions and everything else, and all of the measurements are whole numbers or integers. It's always like it's all a 40th or 400th, They're all whole numbers, which is almost an evidence of intelligence, almost as if the whole system has been artificially created.
Intelligent design.
It's a very bizarre situation. So perhaps the Earth and the Moon was purposely crashed together to create a living planet 4 billion years ago, or perhaps there's just been an incredible accident we have no way of determining. But then life on this planet has been happily proceeding for the last around about 4 billion years, or 3.5 billion years, something like that. And of course, what's been happening is basically life started off with crystallization. Crystals perfectly copy one another. So mud is a perfect example of microcrystals. And the most ancient of all life forms that we know of is the prion, which causes that mad cow disease.
Mm-hmm.
That's a living crystal that lives naturally in the brains of animals, and while it's in the brain of an animal, it reproduces itself.
Mm.
It's a living crystal, but it's only a crystal. And then once it's plants constructed out of 30 different kinds of cells, and animals constructed out of 200 different kinds of cells. And every one of those cells is actually a number of bacteria living together with a virus that creates the DNA or the nucleus, and the little bacteria create the mitochondria and the other cell membranes and the other cell organisms. And so a single living cell, like a human brain cell, for instance, is actually a population of little bacteria all living together to create a bigger organism, and then a population of them create a larger organism like an animal or a plant. And there's only two life forms living on the planet. There's plants, which photosynthesize, take their energy directly from the sun, and there's fungi, which feed on plant material.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, all animal cells are actually fungal cells. And so the only thing that exists on the planet are plants and funguses. So we can really think of ourselves as intelligent fungus.
I was going to say, so what you're telling me, Gary, is I'm really just fungus.
Yeah, that's right. That we're not just fungus, because fungus are wonderful things. Fungus are essential for our survival. Fungus, normal fungus like toadstools and mushrooms and stuff. Some of them are good to eat. They all do essential jobs by breaking down all the nutrients back into, break down all the debris material, living material, dead material back into nutrients available for the plants and animals to continue surviving. But yeah, basically, we're all not only microbial, but we're all fungal as well, where, a horse is a galloping fungus, a whale is a swimming fungus, a monkey is a fungus swinging through the trees.
Mm.
And so we're the advanced animals are all related to slime molds. And of course it's molds that we use to make beer and cheese and bread. There's nothing wrong with fungus, it's wonderful stuff, except that we often have derogatory terms or thoughts about certain fungi. Well, certainly, you're not happy about, foot fungus or athlete's foot or...
It certainly
that's
makes...
the reason that funguses are so successful at colonising us, and so we have athlete's foot and we have dandruff and we have dermatitis and stuff, because they're little microbial fungal cells attacking larger fungal cells.
It certainly makes...
Fungal. But, and together they create, these wonderful animals and plants that operate together to create a living planet. And the living planets are based on photosynthesis. It's a very simple system where the plant, holds out a molecule of carbon and oxygen, carbon dioxide, and a photon of sunlight splits that carbon and oxygen apart, and the plant keeps the one atom of carbon and the two atoms of carbon dioxide, means two atoms of oxygen. The two atoms of oxygen are expelled, and we breathe those two oxygen atoms in, and then we eat some food which is carbon, and we use the energy to put the carbon and the atom together, carbon and oxygen together, and then we breathe out of carbon dioxide. And that's the thing that creates a living planet. That simple process. It just continuously operates and creates all the animals and plants. And then the animals and plants all then adapt to a constantly changing conditions, and the ones that are most adapted to their conditions will survive longer to reproduce, to have offspring. But every now and then we have asteroids coming down, we know, that wipe out whole arrays of life forms or other catastrophic events that take place. And we know that the dinosaurs, after surviving and dominating the planet for something like 160 million years, were wiped out. And the mammals that had also evolved then took over, and we developed. And of course the planet Jupiter, and probably Saturn as well, does a wonderful job of sucking in with their gravity, attracting in comets and asteroids and all the other debris, stopping them from hitting the Earth. And most of the solar systems that we've discovered, around about 200 now, the astronomers have detected, other solar systems with planets spinning around the sun. And most of them, they've found huge planets close to where the Earth would normally orbit.
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare for a planet to have a solar system to have small rocky planets near the sun. Mostly they just have these huge gas giant planets like our Saturn and Jupiter, and often many times bigger. And those planets slowly seem to move in closer to the sun and destroy anything in their way. Now, if say Jupiter and Saturn, say, were much larger gas planets, they may do a better job of attracting in all the comets and meteorites and not allow them to get into the centre of the solar system where the small rocky planets are, and so you may have less asteroid impacts. And if that had happened on Earth, it would have changed the history of Earth, because for about 70 million years before the dinosaurs, the Earth was dominated by the mammal-like reptiles.
Mm-hmm.
They were egg-laying mammals, or mammal-like reptiles, very similar to the platypus and echidna, and platypus and echidna are their descendants.
Mm-hmm.
And a massive planet-wide extinction event took place. No one knows exactly what happened, but it's very possibly an asteroid impact. Devastated the mammal-like reptiles, and it gave the small, little running bipedal crocodiles a chance to take off, and they evolved and dominated the world for 160 million years until they in turn were wiped out, and eventually us human mammals dominated the planet. But if there wasn't those asteroids coming down, it would have changed history. And so, theoretically, with a thing like the mantis, for instance, if you have perhaps just a planet that's just the slightest bit smaller, and so has the gravity just the slightest bit smaller, insects would be able to grow to a larger size.
Mm-hmm.
Insects have an exoskeleton. They have their skeleton on the outside, which is a wonderful thing for a small animal, but unsuccessful for a large animal. And in that science fiction film Stormtroopers, I think it was called, where there was giant insects like giant beetles and giant other insects that they were fighting. I mean, that's not a possibility unless the planet had quite a less gravity, so that those animals, such insects, could grow larger. But if you had that situation, then there's a possibility, who knows how remote, but there's a possibility that you could eventually develop an intelligent species of insect, and then eventually you'd have the mantis. The same way is that if the asteroid hadn't come down that wiped out the dinosaurs, if that's what wiped them out, then it's theoretically possible that the dinosaurs would have eventually evolved intelligent, large-brained dinosaurs. And so you could have intelligent spacefaring reptile-like animals.
The reptilians.
And of course,
yeah.
It's well known that there's at least two species of lizard man or reptoid that's been recorded. And I classified them. One is Reptilis homo viridis, the green lizard man, as one of the species, recorded on July 1983 at Mount Vernon, Missouri, by Ron and Paula Watson farmers. The first classification, and of course in the literature there's a great deal about reptoids. And so it's perfectly possible that different animals could eventually develop intelligence. But the other thing you've got to look at is why are humans intelligent? And the reason is, we've got a brain that can identify up to 150 different individuals, and you only need a brain that large if it's essential for survival.
Mm-hmm.
And for humans, we had to live in groups of about 150 to if you're in groups, and of course I'm talking about the Stone Age that went on for, who knows, 100,000 years before civilization. We had to live in groups of less than 150. If you lived in groups smaller than 150, then your tribe or group would probably be taken over by a group, that was larger of 150.
Yeah.
And to live in groups of say 150 or any social organisation, you have to be able to identify all the individuals. And so we have a brain that can identify 150 individuals. And that's why, once we know about 150 people, it's difficult to remember people beyond that. You begin to forget what they look like, or you forget their names.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with having a large brain is that you have to eat a lot more food, because although our brain only takes up 5% of our body mass, it consumes 20% of our energy.
Mm.
So it's not a positive thing to have intelligence for long-term survival, and that's why the planet isn't inhabited by intelligent animals, because the more intelligent you are means the more you've got to consume. And look what we're doing to the world. We're just eating the world up. We're consuming it like mad. And of course, if you've got a pet dog or a cat, you can give it a little bit of food every day, or you can feed it every second day, or what have you. Because they don't have a large brain, they don't have the need for enormous amounts of nutrients. Whereas the human virtually has to eat almost continuously. We have to eat at least 3 times a day or something, and then maybe snacks. In the meantime, we're constantly getting hungry, and that's because the body is demanding more resources.
Isn't that interesting?
So all of that goes together to understand what humans are in a whole array of different levels. And then the other interesting thing is that, we look at the human being and we know that we look different to other animals for a variety of reasons. We're upright, we're relatively hairless, but there's we're large-brained, etc. But when you look at what we really are, what we appear to really be is we're semi-aquatic chimpanzees. We know that our genetics is something like 96.8% pure chimpanzee genetics. And in fact, we're about 96% closely related to every other animal anyway when you look at our genetics. And our blood, the hemoglobin in our blood is pure chimpanzee blood, and theoretically you could transfer chimpanzee blood into humans without any problem, as long as it's the right blood type. But we're actually semi-aquatic chimpanzees. The fact that our genitals are the front of our body and that we mate face to face is an aquatic animal adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
The large hooded nose in the middle of our face is an adaptation for swimming or diving. If we just had 2 nostrils like a gorilla or a chimpanzee, you couldn't dive into the water head first. The water would go up your nostrils.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, our whole breathing system, the breathing tubes, are identical to aquatic animals. And our subcutaneous fat that lies beneath our skin, it's not found in any other primates. That's another aquatic animal adaptation. Our very upright stance is another aquatic animal adaptation, because to swim well you need to be an elongated animal. You don't want to be hunched over or something.
Yeah.
So in every way you look at humans, and just look at the way we live, we congregate along the coast, we love to swim, people build swimming pools and we're swimming. We wouldn't do that if we weren't semi-aquatic.
Yeah, yeah.
So it looks like that's been an essential part. That's the reason we're puny-haired, because we don't need, thick hair when you're spending a lot of time immersed in the water. And so we were probably hunting and gathering at an early stage, spending a lot of time in water.
Because you're not a big fan of the intervention theory, are you?
No, because everything I can see, everything that, and I mean, I'm only looking at what other scientists and what other, what researchers have discovered working in all their different fields, whether it's in medicine or microbiology or anthropology or anything else. We're just like, we're constructed out of this identical microbes that everything else is constructed out of, and we're constructed in the same way, and we're simply another variation on a common theme. Now it's perfectly possible that, say, extraterrestrials have intervened. We don't know we don't know whether they have or not. Of course, I mean, they might have intervened to such a degree that they actually set the planet and the moon up at the right distance from the sun or something or other, for the possibility of life to take place, and then just left it for billions of years to see what happens. That's a possibility. But at the same time, it could have been purely accidental that it occurred. And it's also possible that they could be intervening with our development. They could be helping us. There are studies to show that since the Second World War, for instance, that there has been a great advance in the increase of infant development. But whether that's natural or whether that's an intervention from extraterrestrials is impossible to decide. But when you're looking for the reality behind anything, you've got to look at the ordinary situation, and not the sort of the unusual or the sort of spectacular or whatever. So the trouble with say alien intervention is, well, it's a possibility, but I mean, aliens didn't intervene to make porpoises swim in the water and catch fish and use echolocation. Aliens didn't intervene in giraffes to stretch their necks so they could eat on the treetops or whatever, or the billion other adaptations that take place around the planet. So because I'm a biologist, I'm acutely aware of all the differences in all the different organisms. Koalas have incredibly long guts so they can digest eucalyptus leaves. Or were aliens involved in that? Or did the koalas simply adapt to the situation themselves? So in every animal and plant you see amazing examples of adaptation for survival. And just because our adaptation has particularly been for large brains, you say, maybe extraterrestrials then have done something to make sure we have larger brains. But then larger brains could just as easily exterminate ourselves because we've got to consume more. And the way we're destroying the world's environment and cutting down the forest and creating global warming, we could easily go extinct, and with economic collapse actually taking place all around us. Intelligence isn't an attribute that, as far as we know, that gives you long-term success. So they're my thoughts on intervention. Some things are possible, and perhaps that's taking place.
Yeah.
But most of the evidence doesn't show it. However, on the other hand, I mean, the wonderful discovery of that star child skull, or what's referred to as the star child skull.
Well, I was going to say, you're at the Nexus conference with Lloyd, so...
oh, yes, indeed.
What were your thoughts on the star child skull?
Well, because there's a difference between intervention and cohabitation, say.
Yes.
Because, and I mean, I wouldn't argue against intervention, but I would argue that it's perfectly possible that we are like we are.
What you're saying is
the normal workings of natural.
So yeah, what you're saying is it's not necessary for intervention.
It's not necessary, yeah, because look at all the other fabulous animals. Most humans don't think about the other animals; they take them all for granted.
Yeah.
The sperm whale can dive, kilometres down to hunt giant squid, and then you wouldn't think, I think aliens help them to do it or something. That would be regarded as ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, then it could be argued that it's just as ridiculous that aliens have done anything to us, so that we can, exist on the planet as we are. But it's a possibility. Who knows what's really going on? But the other interesting thing about humans and extraterrestrials, and of course, even though I've classified 29 species, I don't know if any of them really exist because I haven't actually, as far as I can remember, encountered one. I've seen maybe 19 UFOs over time.
Yeah.
Nothing too spectacular, just very unusual craft that I've looked at through binoculars that I haven't been able to determine exactly what they were, whether they're human or extraterrestrial in origin. I wouldn't have a clue. Nothing so close that that I could be positive that it wasn't something that we could ever create. But if there aren't any extraterrestrials and we do survive, then it's been estimated that, say, every 200 years, and you look at the way technology is advancing massively, every 200 years we're able to launch a spacecraft, say, to another habitable planet around some distant star. After about 5 million years, which isn't all that far into the future, even though it sounds a long distance for us, but 5 million years ago, we were very chimpanzee-like, and we still are somewhat chimpanzee-like. But say 5 million years into the future, if we're successful, and space travel does become a reality, and we can travel, not even at the speed of light, just at normal speeds that are attainable, we could have colonized the entire galaxy in about 5 million years.
Yeah.
So if we can colonise the galaxy in, say, 5 million years, and we know we can definitely get to the moon because we've been there, then it's very likely that we've been colonised, that the other intelligent species have colonised us.
Yes.
And some people put forward the statement or the theory that there can't be extraterrestrials here because it's too far to travel. But that's a bit silly because, well, maybe they started travelling a long time ago.
Yeah.
Who knows how long ago they started, and who knows how fast they can travel.
Yeah.
And so it's very possible that this planet has been colonised by several species of extraterrestrial. And where would they live? They wouldn't live on the surface. They would live underground. They'd have their bases underground. Because once you become a spacefaring species, once you live and die in spacecraft, survival is always inside. Like, outside is death, inside is safety. And unlike Star Trek, I'm a great fan of those wonderful science fiction programs who give us an idea of what may be possible. But it would be probably totally impossible for us ever to walk across the surface of a living planet, of an alien planet. Because just like this planet, and the problem with extraterrestrials would have living here, or even visiting us, is that if they attempted to breathe our air, they would also breathe in those 10,000 microbes that are inhabiting every square metre of air.
Yeah.
And you'd breathe those microbes straight into your lungs, straight into your blood system. Within 1 minute, they'd be in your brain.
Yeah, yeah.
And because you're not immune, your immune system doesn't comprehend those microbes. They'd start eating you from the inside out. It would be like Ebola. You'd be eaten alive within minutes. So we can probably never walk across the surface of an alien planet inhaling its atmosphere.
Do you think Admiral...
And aliens wandering around with us.
Yeah.
But you could live in the interior of the planet beneath the ground, and that wouldn't worry you because while you're in space, there's nothing much to look at but the stars, and inside, is safe, and outside, death.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Do you think Admiral Byrd might have been onto something? Do you think the hollow Earth theory is feasible?
No, I don't think that. I think if the Earth was hollow, we would have already colonised it. I mean, you couldn't stop us from getting in there, you know. And every time we have an earthquake, the seismometers detect the vibrations as they travel through the earth. And if there was a big hollow in it, then that would be immediately apparent. You'd have evidence, and it would be part of our scientific understanding of the earth that it's hollow, or that there are hollows in it. But you have to remember that it's not. People tend to think of the earth as, you know, a rocky planet, but it's not a rocky planet. It's a liquid planet. It's a planet of white hot liquid rock. So where is the hollow? You can't have a hollow because the planet's filled up with white hot liquid rock that's all moving around, and it's white hot like the sun. You could have big caverns not far below the surface, but remember, you only have to go down a small number of kilometres, and it already begins to get too hot. And mine workers working deep underground know that, you know, it's incredibly hot down there. So if you had a hollow earth, it would be incredibly hot. And then, of course, you need solar radiation. You need light to create a photosynthesis to create an ecosystem that organisms, animals and plants can live in. So no, I think it's incredibly unlikely that there would be a hollow earth.
Still a good story, though, isn't it?
Wonderful stories. I love the stories, and I think it would be wonderful to have such things. And I've always enjoyed science fiction, and you know, and I love conspiracy theories and stuff like that, just because they're entertaining. But I don't believe that they're a reality. I mean, there's conspiracies in everything, but conspiracies in families or whatever. but the reality, the general reality, is what we see around us.
Yeah. You've been very generous with your time today, Gary, and I really appreciate it. But just before I let you go, I wanted to jump back to kind of the, well, it's not even really a crypto question, but your understanding, because you do have your radio show on ABC North Coast, isn't it? ABC
That's right, yes.
North Coast. What's your understanding of the bee dieback that's happening all around the world? Should we be terrified about that? Because, you know, if we lose the bees, it's all over, isn't it?
And exactly, see, that's the problem with having intelligence, you know. You have intelligence, you develop, the bees are absolutely essential, our honey bees are essential for the pollination of our food crops, and so then we've become to rely on bees, and of course, particularly in the northern hemisphere, in the Western world, where the environment has been totally decimated, and there's virtually no wild bees left, and they're all in hives being carted around to pollinate the crops, and of course to produce honey. And of course we've messed with the environment to such a degree that there's this total bee die-off taking place. Now I would imagine that it'll turn out to be some little microbe or whatever that's causing the problem, but it could be something else. I think we'll eventually determine what it is. But Australia is fortunate because, and that's one of the reasons why you need the natural environment. In Australia, we have these wonderful eucalyptus forests where they're not being destroyed and logged and everything. But these eucalyptus flowers, of course, produce enormous amounts of nectar, essential for our honey eaters and our native insects, and also for honey bees. And so our bees not only get to pollinate the crops, but they also get to pollinate native plants and exotic garden plants and stuff. So we're probably in a much better situation, and that's simply because there's not so many of us. You know, some business people would like to see 100 million people in Australia, but the trouble with when you've got a population like that, 1 minute you're 100 million, and then suddenly you drop down to zero because the environmental disasters would wipe you from the face of the planet. Not enough water, not enough food, you know, too many destructive humans.
Yes. So don't panic about the bees just yet, is what you're saying.
Oh, well, I mean, anything can happen. I think that humanity, except in Australia and in other countries where the populations are relatively small, populations, say of the Northern Hemisphere in particular, are in great peril myself, because you simply cannot have huge numbers of any organism, whether it's koalas or humans or bacteria, consuming a limited resource.
Yeah.
And the more people you have, the more pollution you're going to have, and the more environmental destruction you're going to have. And so, I mean, the economists say that this recession that's gripping the world, this economic collapse, it's hardly affecting us in Australia because we've got a small population and a big continent with lots of resources. But for the rest of the world, the economists are saying it's only just beginning. That it's going to be absolutely devastating. And I mean, you've had 750 Woolworths stores closed in England, and 1,500 massive factories in China closed down, etc.
Yeah.
And all of these economic systems are built up in exactly the same way that biological systems are built up. They take a very long time to build up, and they can collapse very quickly, and it'll take a very long time to build them up again. So I'm not overly optimistic about humanity's. I'm realistic, and of course I hope that we're going to survive, but we're only going to survive if we understand the reality of our situation, and that's why I spent so much time, 25 years, to put it together, my book Understanding Humans, Extraterrestrials, and the Awakening of the Planetary Mind. And the planetary mind is that, as we know, we're a global mind, and because especially with the internet and computers and everything, and communication and telecommunications, I mean, basically we remember, as I was saying earlier, the only thing that's really human is our brain. So, and I mean, we think of ourselves as these wonderful beings, of which we are, with our wonderful bodies and, abilities to run and jump and breathe and eat and reproduce and everything. But most of our bodies are made of microbes. Remember, the really human part is just the brain, as well as the lungs and the blood system. So the universe is constructed, as we've seen, virtually out of consciousness. And so what we have here on this planet, and as far as we know, it's completely unique. Like, I mean, we're only grasping at the existence, little bits of data, bits of information, sightings and reports that we're not sure 100% about, of extraterrestrials visiting the planet and travelling around on their craft and everything. But if it turns out that they don't really exist, that there aren't any extraterrestrials, and that it's only us humans on this planet, and we could be standing on the edge of extinction with it, destruction of the environment and the collapse of the essential bees and the collapse of the economy. We could be on the abyss, and yet, as far as we know, we're the most complex phenomena, the most complex beings in the universe, and the only known example of universal consciousness. And when we look at the universe, although we take things like consciousness and life and democracy and justice as absolutely essential, to the universe they're of no consequence, they're an abomination. The universe is only interested in hydrogen, and for billions of years before we existed there has been nothing but hydrogen and helium, and for billions of years after us, if we disappear, there'll be nothing but hydrogen and helium. The whole universe is just a great swirling mass of galaxies with supernovae and black holes. It plays with itself. The universe is having fun on a massive scale, and it's almost as if as far as we know, the only place where universal consciousness actually exists, advanced consciousness, is on the surface of this planet. We're just a few kilometres below us. It's white hot like the sun, and just a couple of kilometres above us, it's freezing cold. And then you reach the vacuum of space. So this narrow shell of living ecosystems which we're constantly polluting. And we talk about people don't believe in global warming, but if we were to get all the gases in the atmosphere and squeeze them together, we'd find that the atmosphere is 500 times smaller than the ocean, so it's easy to pollute. So if it wasn't for these extraterrestrials, and we're not 100% sure about them, we're the only known example of universal consciousness, of complex universal consciousness. I mean, who knows? There could be gods, there could be one great being. I regard all of reality as a sort of mind of God, but this is the only known advanced consciousness existing, and so I'm hoping that there are extraterrestrials looking after us, because we could easily go into extinction. I mean, we only need another nuclear arms race with countries like Iran developing nuclear weapons, and where's that going to lead us?
Well, I mean, just as you've explained, it's quite extraordinary, really, when you look at it in the way in which you've explained it, that we would even dare to pollute this planet in the way that we have been, because it is such an extraordinary thing, either by divine intervention, but still it would have taken 50 million years to have, for them to come back and say, hey, I wonder if that experiment worked, or whether it was just some gigantic accident. The fact that we're here and that this extraordinary ecosystem exists, it just makes me feel even worse than I already do about the way we're destroying it.
That's why I've been in the conservation movement since the 1960s, because, we are so special. And in Australia especially, we're so fortunate, or anybody that has the opportunity to become educated, to be able to have the time to be able to read and to study like I've been able to do. Because if I was born in say, China or Africa or South America or so many other places in the world, I wouldn't have had the time to read. I wouldn't have had an affluent lifestyle. And I've never been wealthy because I've devoted so much of my time to protecting the environment. I've been in so many conservation battles and so much time into research, because I regard the humanity as so incredibly valuable, as is every other plant and animal, which together creates this living planet, Gaia, the living Earth.
So you had that opportunity and you used it, rather than a lot of, like you said, Chinese or perhaps Indian people will never have that opportunity to be able to do what you've done.
That's right, and you just look at the Western world, we've got huge numbers, millions upon millions of affluent people. And what are they doing with their lives? I mean, they're just wasting them, whether they're addicted to alcohol or drugs, or they're just addicted to entertainment and TV, or they're addicted to wealth accumulation and status, so that, they're better off than their neighbours or what have you. And of all of it is destroying the only known cosmic intelligence.
Yes, it's quite extraordinary. Gary, where can people get your books so they can understand all the fabulous 25 years it's taken you to put these books together?
Yeah, so look, I haven't even approached any publishers yet, because I've only, recently finished them. And so the two books, as I've been talking, one's called Understanding Humans, Extraterrestrials, and the Awakening of the Planetary Mind, and I'm selling that for $45, postage included, and an Australian Cryptozoology, which is $55, postage included, and my address is Post Office Box 383, Brunswick Heads, New South Wales, 2483.
And all of that is available on the Ghost Radio's webpage, of course, as well. Gary's email address is there, so if you've got something that you want Gary to identify, or perhaps you've heard a Yowie howl, or you have a picture of a Tasmanian tiger, or anything, send it to Gary, because, of course, he would love to see it. And the information for where to get the books is available on Ghost Radio's webpage. And Gary also has a fantastic show on the ABC North Coast, New South Wales Radio, I believe every Wednesday morning, Gary?
That's right. You can only be heard in Northern Soils and Southeast Queensland. It's not on the internet or anything. I've been doing it for 12 years, and I have to identify virtually every species of animal, bird, reptile, amphibian, insect from people's description or descriptions of their calls. It happens every Wednesday morning. I've got a web page, as you said, on the ABC, and it must be the only federally funded or government funded web page with a bit of cryptozoology there, because you can read the 50 reports I've received of thylacines, Tasmanian tiger-like animals, and I'm holding see a photograph of me. I'm holding the plaster cast of what appears to be a yowie.
Mm-hmm.
And in this book, Australian Cryptozoology, it includes drawings from life and field research by a wonderful woman by the name of Pixie Burns,
Mm-hmm.
that's been studying these animals, and she's like the Australian version of Jane Goodall, who studied the chimpanzees, and Diane Fossey, who studied the gorillas in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And Pixie has been able to study these animals because the only yowies that will generally approach humans or come anywhere near humans are the males, the territorial males, very powerful animals.
Yep.
And you've got to understand how the male yowie perceives humans. I mean, we look at the yowies as like a hairy man, and they are. I mean, they're virtually an unknown species of human. But of course, they look at us as very strange and dangerous yowies that can do all kinds of weird, wonderful things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they, like in any population, the males, whether they're human or anything else, are a lot more careful with other males than they are with females. So that say at a party or something, you might be, if you're a male, you might be happy to interrelate with some of the women, say, which you'd fear less than, say, some of the other males, especially this great big hulking males. You think, I don't even want to talk to that fellow. Look at him, or he's a big thug or something or other.
So they're less intimidated by women.
Yeah, you'd be more intimidated by the males. Now, I think this is what's happening with the yowies. They're intimidated by males, but they're interested in females. They're not so imitated by women. So Pixie has had the ability to, and the incredible patience. I mean, she spent enormous amounts of periods of time actually spending time with these incredible animals and being able to observe them. Even then, she only gets momentary observations because they're like any predator, and things like lions or even dogs and cats. I mean, they spend most of their time hanging about doing next to nothing, just watching. And that's what these yowies do. They spend long periods of time completely immobile, just watching what the humans are doing.
Yep.
And they're moving around. Their population seem to be increasing with, since we've removed Aboriginal and dingoes from the environment, and so the yowie population seems to have increased. And I'll get reports of a friend of mine heard one on his roof, and you could hear the corrugated iron bending from the weight, and then it leapt to the ground, and then it ran off. Sounded like it was a cow when it ran off. I mean, it was so heavy. In fact, there was two of them.
Jeez.
Then he heard it jump up onto another roof of another house. These are like, rural residences.
Yeah, yeah.
And the dogs go off. You can hear the dogs when one's moving through, but then the dogs go inside. The dogs are petrified of them.
Yeah.
And they're omnivorous, particularly feeding on things like possums and wallabies and what have you. We don't really know. I found the leg and tail of a small rainforest wallaby or paddymmelon lying on a track on Springbrook. That is, something had simply torn it off the animal. So and so I've actually got drawings of these yowies that Pixie has done, and of course at the same time we don't want to attract large numbers of people to these animals, so we're keeping the whole thing, a bit quiet.
Yes, no, that's understandable. The book that Gary is talking about is actually in the cryptozoology world. It's a bit of a cryptozoology Bible. Gary is very well renowned for his research and all of his work that he has done throughout the years, as you can hear for the time he spent with us this evening. You've been very generous with your time, Gary. Thank you so very much. for all the work that you've done over the years and for sharing some of it with us tonight.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Okay, that's Underworld for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe and blessings to you all.
You've been listening to Australia's own Underworld Show with host Lia Ramses. The Underworld Show is produced in Perth, Western Australia by iProdigy Communications exclusively for Ghost Radio Australia and the Ghost Radio Network. Tune in every Sunday at 8 p.m. Perth time to hear fascinating guests and topics such as the one you just listened to. For more information on upcoming guests, events, and breaking news, visit www.underworldshow.com or www.ghostradio.com.au.